People often approach me in the streets just to point out the obvious. They say, "Wow, Jonathan, you are such an absolute god at Crash Bandicoot." Then, with a naive sparkle in their eyes, they ask me what tips I could give them to transform them from a platforming novice into a demigod wielding even a fraction of my divine prowess. Normally, I politely remind them of their place by spitting in their eye for daring speak to me. But today, I'm feeling generous. Pull out those pens and papers, ladies and gentlemen, because your boy is about to show you the ropes. These are the ropes. My secret is cheating. Lots and lots of cheating. In today's humble opinion, we're giving our desk a violent Wumpa-ing in Crash Bandicoot, the Sane Trilogy. Crash Bandicoot is beloved by fans everywhere, and for good reason. As one of the pioneers in the 3D platforming genre during its boom in the late 90s, and one of the top-selling titles for the PlayStation 1, no one can deny that it was a powerhouse that greatly shaped the genre and influenced the medium of video games as we know them. Not only because of itself, but also in the form of its commercial success, giving its developer, Naughty Dog, the resources and reputation that eventually brought us the Uncharted series and The Last of Us. Layer in collective decades worth of warm, fond childhood memories, and it's clear that the public has spoken. Crash Bandicoot, the Sane Trilogy, is a force to be reckoned with. It's everything that was great about the 3 original games in the series, revamped, repackaged, and ready to be enjoyed by a new generation, something that allows us to connect through the shared experience of a great childhood game. It's objectively fantastic. Wow, I can't believe I actually made it through all of that with a straight face. Contrary to public opinion, Crash Bandicoot, the Sane Trilogy, is a steaming pile of hot garbage. The sort of hot garbage a shit factory would spew out as wasteful byproduct. Of course, that's a statement so blasphemous to nostalgia that no public figure in the right mind has the cojones to say it, but what can I say? This game has driven me insane. Take a second to think back to your first attempt at something you're now better at, or fuck, go back and watch my abomination of a first video. Then ask yourself, if we kept absolutely everything the same except for the quality of the materials or stylistic tweaking, would we consider those products good by today's standards? If I remade my Octodad Let's Play, keeping the commentary and gameplay exactly the same, but I had better lighting, a better camera quality, a voice presence, would it magically be up to standard? Of course not. Granted, that video series wasn't a wildly successful video game franchise that earned millions, but it was still important enough for me personally to use it as an example. I meant all of the positive things that I said about the original series. In their time, they were genre defining because they were among the first to hit the scene. They deserved all of the praise and recognition they received. They were crazy, colorful, and experimental. They were nothing like anything else in the Wild West of 90s 3D platformers. But like the first steps of any creative endeavor, it hasn't weathered the test of time. Other games have come out to build on the good ideas and sand away the rough edges. Gone are the days when you could get away with a reverse-facing chase sequence or with changing camera angles so frequently that you get vertigo. The fact that it hasn't been burned at the stake for appropriating tribal culture is nothing short of a miracle, honestly. I suppose that's all supposed to be the point though, isn't it? A team of developers have painstakingly handcrafted a faithful recreation of a legendary classic. Except, they haven't really, have they? They've selectively chosen when to be faithful and when to deviate. The developers themselves have admitted that the jumping physics in the first game don't use that of the classic Crash Bandicoot, but rather a mixture of the second and third. Doesn't sound too bad until you consider the platforming was already demanding and the levels were specifically designed around the classic jumping mechanics. Combine that with the further admission that Crash's hitbox is not a box as in the original, but a pill shape, and that ledges aren't registered as square but rounded, and you'll start to get a fuller picture. The developer wisely called this making the game more difficult, but I call it annoyingly jostling me off a ledge I could have otherwise narrowly made, or getting killed by threats that I was visibly safe from until I rack up so many deaths that I finally break free of the karmic cycle. Seriously, cheap deaths are absolutely unacceptable in a game with one-hit deaths and a life system. Now, I don't want to give the wrong impression here. It's not all bad. The visual overhaul is nothing if not amazing. There were quite a few times when I got a sense of accomplishment for overcoming an obstacle that was giving me trouble. It also did a great job of bringing some of the most iconic moments of my memories to life, namely the boss fights. To me, Crash's bosses always captured that essence of 90s 3D platformers. They were hit-based, wildly creative, and escalated in difficulty as the fight wore on. No two fights ever even resembled each other, and they often put learned mechanics into new contexts to make a minigame or a puzzle. You don't see that kind of design very frequently anymore. To put it more succinctly, my issue with the game isn't that it's a remake, or that it tries to accurately recreate potentially dated ideas and mechanics. Nostalgia can make that worth it. My issue is that it struck the worst possible middle ground. Crash Bandicoot is the most iconic of the 3 games. It's what's bringing the longtime fans, it's what's bringing the curious newcomers. For the developer to openly acknowledge that the first game is somewhat broken and to try the other 2 instead is indicative of a problem. That new players lose interest in all other elements and settle for just getting through in one piece due to immense frustration is a problem. There were solutions. The most obvious 2 would be 1, fixing the jump for each game, or 2, meticulously tweaking the level designs in favor of the new jump style to ensure that playing Crash Bandicoot feels like playing Crash Bandicoot, because otherwise what's the point? The integrity of the level design has already been compromised. As one player points out, the trap doors in the lab used to have a contrasting wooden texture that made them stand out, but are now very similar to the rest of the level, so they're harder to see. If you can afford to sacrifice visual clarity for artistic vision, cleaning up some spacing issues should also be acceptable. A third and perhaps less obvious solution would be to get rid of the life system. Controversial, I'm sure, but let me make and counter a few points. First of all, lives were already antiquated by the time Crash came out. They were more or less included for the same reason every save button has a floppy disk. The transition to console inherently erased the need for a life system which benefited arcades. They add nothing. I assume the biggest argument would be that it makes the game too easy. Game overs force the players to master the challenges of the map. Here's my counter argument. Time trials already do that. Odds are if you care about challenge and mastery, you'll want to collect the relics to show off how good at the game you are. The difficulty of maintaining lives was never where your challenge lied. On top of that, the biggest piece of advice for conquering notoriously hard levels is to farm up on lives beforehand, almost as if to circumvent the need of them to begin with, as if to utilize checkpoints and limit game overs. It completely negates the life system anyway. All lives do in a game like this is layer on an unnecessary pressure and emphasize negative aspects. If an unfair death gives you a game over and sets you way back to the beginning of the level, it would feel a lot worse than simply being set back to a checkpoint. To me, getting rid of lives grants a pathway for those who just want to overcome and make it through while not sacrificing the hardcore elements that challenge seekers thirst for. It'd go a long way towards smoothing out that difficulty spike. Speaking of difficulty spikes, did you know that Stormy Ascent is considered the hardest level in Crash Bandicoot history, so much so that it was removed from the original game? I didn't. Did you know it's available as DLC and was automatically included in the version distributed with the Humble Monthly? I didn't. Want to guess how I felt when I went into it because it was unlocked by the game's first and therefore most fundamental and elementary levels? You want to whisper your answer to the smoldering crater where my asshole used to be before Stormy Ascent got a hold of it? That really should have been put somewhere else. Crash Bandicoot the Sane Trilogy earns a 6 out of 10. That's the middle ground between the deep frustrations I experienced personally during my playthrough and my admission that I more or less glossed over the other 2 games, which fans and developers both seem to believe are better than the first. I don't feel that's a slight given I played the main attraction most of the way through. I'll take everyone's word that the sequels are easier and better equipped. I simply wasn't having fun. I don't think it was insurmountably difficult or even as rough as some make it out to be. I breezed through many of the levels deemed to be the most difficult, like the slippery climb and the tribal fortress. The simple fact of the matter is that the games haven't aged well. The camera and level design make it awful for gauging depth, which is critical in many if not all levels. This is especially true in levels that make your shadow invisible. Also, including a third plane and side-scrolling levels creates a similar dilemma. Missing a jump because it's unclear that you're slightly too far forward or back feels even worse than simply over or undershooting. I watched one video where a guy kept slipping between the bridge plank and the pillar that he was trying to get to because at the angle you saw it, the two looked connected. Trial and error gameplay like that is already wall-fistingly difficult, but add on top of that, the slippery hitboxes and ridiculous or unclear danger zones in an unforgiving environment where a single hit spells death, and you've got yourself a recipe for anti-fun. I don't like it when it's demanded of me to be perfect, but I have no ability to reliably know what that looks like. It was just unfair, and I'm happy to wash my hands of it. Thank you everyone for watching, and special thanks to Vicarious Visions for bringing the childhood memories of millions back to life. The game looked amazing and was fun when everything aligned as it was supposed to. You were in a tricky spot, having to start from scratch, and I'd say you were pretty close. I'm not naive enough to think that the mistakes were intentional, the result of laziness, or something that could be immediately seen or fixed, but they hurt this game quite a bit. and it's worth thinking about in future endeavors. Until next time, remember that failure is not the worst case scenario, to glow on with your bad selves, and stay awesome.